All right, well, hello everybody, and welcome back to the second episode of Passimian Valley. Uh, Today we're going to speak about Zoroark-GX, one of the most interesting cards coming out the last two sets, and also, granted they aren't quite impressive sets, but either way, you got to work with what you got. So to talk about Zoroark-GX, I have three incredible guests on, and I'll just go ahead and introduce them. They could add on to that introduction as much as they want, and we'll just start from there. So I suppose the best way to do it would be to go alphabetically. Our first returning guest is Blaguard. You might notice that this is episode two, so it does speak a lot about the show, considering we're recycling guests from episode two. Either way, thank you, Mr. Blaguard. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. And no problem at all. I'm glad to be here. Zoroark is amazing. Really a diamond in the okay set that is Shining Legends.
All right, great. So next we have Mr. G-Man, which obviously is a reference to Half-Life. But either way, we're not talking about Half-Life today. We're going to talk about Pokemon. How are you doing, Mr. G-Man?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm excited.
And finally, the last guest, most of you would probably know him as the sweetheart of the subreddit for a single day, but I recognize him as the man who doubled the price of Clefairy, Mr. Grammy Bunyip.
Yes, yeah. I go by Rukan. Feel free to call me that.
All right, sounds good. So everybody I brought on today will be talking about Zoroark-GX. So I think the best thing we do is talk about how the last two sets, because they are one mini set and one quote unquote complete set, have been rather underwhelming considering the consecutive sets we've had that were meta changing each one of them, those being Sun and Moon Base, Guardians Rising, and Burning Shadows. So, what are your first impressions regarding both Shining Legends and Crimson Invasion?
I think Zoroark's the only card that really, really matters. But I think most people would agree on that.
Don't forget about Shining Mew. That
Some
card is
people consider
amazing.
that like Grandpa, but what else? Maybe.
So, I guess we could start with Shining Legends. Shining Legends, the big money card was the Zoroark, which when it came, I believe, was going for about 40, which has had now settled to about 12-ish. Uh, there are a few decent texts in the set. We've seen Shining Mew, Shining Jirachi, even Lanios. Each one has, some value to it.
I originally thought Shining Jirachi was going to be really good, but people are saying that for London, a lot of people are going to run Mr. Mime. And Jirachi really wants a Cocoa spread before it can like one-shot a Gardevoir or something like that. People are considering Mime. It doesn't seem very good anymore.
You see, that's where I slightly disagree, because if you have a Potown and then Choice Band with Shining Jirachi, the Gardevoir has 3 damage counters plus the 40 from your whatever its attack is, and then it doesn't knock out the Curlia, but if they rare candy, then it gets the knockout on the Rolts.
All the way, so it doesn't actually.
It has the effect, unlike Espeon EX, it goes all the way down to the Ralt. It puts the Curly in the hand too.
Oh, so then it is a knockout either way.
Yeah,
If you get one Potown.
That would be 70 with the choice band.
Yeah, I forgot about Potown. Potown would fix Jirachi.
Overall, I think Shining Jirachi is a really good card. It's like an Espeon EX for a single target, but it's not 2 prizes. And against stuff that doesn't abuse rare candy, it does the job a little bit better.
It has a lot of potential. Just slap it in like Grandpa Garb or Galissapod Garb, and you just
Absolutely.
fix your Gardevoir matchup.
At the same time,
Yeah.
it isn't as splashable because it isn't a one color list, so you can't add it to your Ninetales,
True.
for example. You can't add it to, not that anybody would add a Volcanion, but you can't add it there either.
But anything that runs Rainbow Energy can use it.
The thing is, I don't think Galissapod wants to run Rainbow, because I think if they run Rainbow, it really hurts them against Rampa.
Yeah, but that's how they attack with Garb.
Galissapod really needs Garb that badly. Like, when I went to Hartford, there were at least 2 Galissapod decks that just had no Garbodor. I actually think the Garbodor list Galissapod decks are pretty competitive.
You see, I just don't like Galissapod overall, so it's hard to even consider the options of putting Shining Jirachi in any of them.
Alright, so...
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat about Pod.
Yeah, Pod has seen a little bit of a decline. My recent League Cup, people have been playing around, Galissapod Zoroark, which has renewed its play rate, but overall it has gone a little bit down. Most of the videos with professional players have been noting that its value has been a little down too. But London will really answer a lot of these questions.
Of
And
course.
should dodge fire. I think you can build it without Garbodor. The Garbodor list versions are actually better against because your Garbodor's a dead card anyways, so you can add more consistency. And locking Gardevoir out of energies doesn't actually help that much if you're less consistent. Because as long as you can pressure early, that's good enough. You don't necessarily need to lock their energy acceleration out. As long as you can get that damage onto their Gardevoirs early.
Yeah, because with 4 Guzma, you have potential just to knock out all the Curlies they're trying to build or all the Ralts they attach energy to, and then worry about a Guardia if it ever comes down.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue is the Sylveon. It just walls for Galissapod against Gardevoir these days.
True.
And that's why I just don't like Galissapod. That's just like one of the many reasons. Sylveon's just too good.
All right, so
Pod against Drampa. I think that's the main selling point. Is that enough? I don't know.
All right, sounds good. So we've talked about Shining Legends, but the more recent one is obviously Crimson Invasion, and most people probably didn't feel quite as hyped for this set as they have had for the last three sets. What are the big, noteworthy cards you guys are looking at?
Honestly, only
Regis-
looking at Gladian and Countercatcher. That's kind of me as a Bulu player speaking.
That's fair.
I think Registeel looks interesting. I think Valley looks good.
Yeah, I think this set's a lot of little cards that have potential in their niches, but nothing really big, like no Zoroarks, no Guardies, no Garbs.
I think the only card that could possibly be that is Buzzwole.
Maybe.
And that's a possibility.
I think a few of the other cards have more potential than Buzzwole, just because they aren't necessarily as powerful, but they at least fulfill niche roles better.
That is a good point. Buzzwole, we've seen the main highlight of Buzzwole is obviously his first attack, which is similar to the old Landers EX, which does 30 to the bench and 30 to your active. And while that's strong, there is a reason why nobody really plays Landers in Expanded anymore. There is a certain power creep that has happened.
Which is why it's better in Standard than Expanded. With all the evolutions, the spread is really strong. But I think the big problem is that it loses so hard to Garb, because it's just hard to not have enough items to get knocked out when you only need 3 items and a choice band to knock it out in the first place. Sorry, 4 items.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Without choice band, it's just I believe 1 or 2 more items anyway, so it's not that big.
It's 5.
Yeah, 5 items. So it's a risky card. London once again will answer its viability or not, and even then, I believe we might need for a few more sets before we see if there's any value to actually running a Buzzwole. So while we are talking about Buzzwole, this isn't really the highlight of the show. The highlight of the show is Zoroark-GX, and that's what we're going to talk about. So just to outline to everyone, first we'll be talking about Zoroark as a draw engine, Zoroark's role in Expanded, Zoroark's role into Standard, and finally we're just going to talk about what we think will happen at London and for the first Standard event, and San Jose, which is the first big Expanded event. So obviously, in Standard right now, the two main draw engine Pokemon are Octillery and Oranguru, if you don't consider Lele into a support or a draw engine. So, what do you guys think is the main difference between Zoroark, Octillery, and Oranguru?
I think you should only play Zoroark as a draw engine if it helps in some other way, as a second attacker or as a way to discard your energies for Ninetales or anything like that.
I can see that. I'm kind of the opposite. I think that Zoroark is better in most instances than Octillery, unless you're running something like a heavy Brooklet Hill engine that's really, really facilitating your Octilleries getting out there.
Alright, so let's just do a one-on-one comparison between, because obviously comparing the three is a little hard. So let's just put Zoroark against Octillery. In decks that you would run Octillery right now, why would you run Zoroark?
Well, it depends. In Ninetales, I think that's really good because you have a second attacker, and then you have a way to fuel your Aqua Patches.
Absolutely.
But then in anything else, I don't know why you would want to take out the Octillery. Because Zoroark it's a good draw card, but it's a 2-price Pokemon, so just keep that in mind.
It's a 2-price Pokemon with a 210 HP, though. I think
it's not going to get knocked out immediately like a Shaman or a Jirachi would.
The only issue that's stopping Zoroark from completely taking over Octillery. I literally think that's the only... If I think Galley didn't exist, every deck would be running Zoroark over Octillery.
Yeah, I can see that.
That's quite possible.
Yeah, that is a good reason. Gallade, for those who don't know, lets you look at your top few cards and rearrange the order, which combined with Octillery, which would pretty much do a mini sort of Mallow play. Alright, so next, Zoroark versus Oranguru. So Oranguru is obviously the easiest to play, because it is just a 1-of, maybe a 2-of if you're really pushing it, and it protects you from N. You could use it as an attacker, technically. So what's the main difference you guys would put between Zoroark and Oranguru?
Well, Oranguru is used because it's so easy to slap down. It's like, I know John Roberts, Mr. Bulu himself, says he basically always plays his games with a 3-card hand or less, so every single turn he's making use of Oranguru to draw his hand up. But he doesn't need to worry about prizing one of it, either the basic or the stage 1, and he doesn't need to worry about actually getting the evolution. Plus, you can use it the first turn you play it down.
Yep.
And it doesn't take up hardly as many spots as Zoroark and Octillery do.
Yeah. You can't really run stage 1s very well in something like Volcanion, because you're always like Sycamoring.
Yeah.
The more away your Octillery, turn 1, you're just in such a bad spot.
Alright, so you know what? Let's just sort of move into both formats to put into context what we're trying to say. So let's start with standard, which is what most people are probably trying to play. So standard, is it safe to say that you can't really use Zoroark as its own sort of archetype?
I think so.
I'm not sure, because, Quad Zoroark, that's just... I haven't done much with it, but that just sounds insane, on paper, but...
Alright, so let me...
So, I tried a lot of Zoroark variants, and it's very solid. The problem is simply just Gallade. You can't just have a bad matchup against Gardevoir right now. And Gallade, if you run a Zoroark heavy deck, you're just going to get destroyed by Gallade at some point.
There is also the problem that even if we don't think Buzzwole is that good, they're still getting hype and people are still going to play it.
Yeah.
Well, does that well against Zoroark? Because it doesn't one-shot. And then Zoroark's sitting there setting up a secondary win condition that does deal with the Buzzwoles.
See, well, 30 plus 20 from Strong Energy is 50, so you're doing 80 with the Choice Band. If you add a second Strong Energy, that's a one-shot. Or, no, that'd be 200.
And
so it's
even
almost
without Strong Energy...
You're not doing it for one energy.
The Zoroarks, though. Or the Zorua.
Yeah. Honestly, it's so much damage for one energy that I don't think you can just ignore it.
The problem is, Zoroark's supposed to be there to set up a secondary win condition. So if they're going for the Zoroarks, they aren't going for your secondary win condition. And even if they take out a Zoroark-GX and a Zoroark, take 3 prizes, they've kind of left your win condition unanswered.
So what is that win condition? Like another Pokemon in the deck, or what do you mean?
Of things, but basically you can either try Necrozma, Gardevoir, Decidueye, Ninetales.
Okay.
Right, so...
you can try almost anything.
Yeah,
these are all different variants. I think we're more talking about Zoroark as the main engine of the deck, a main attacker.
So, an argument would be something like Zoroark Bats, or Zoroark Espeon, or Zoroark, no, not Zoroark because it's sort of counterintuitive, but, we would just be ideas that the main focus of the deck would be Zoroark. I don't think there's really any argument to try and put Zoroark as the front page. Most of us would just put as, the secondary attacker, much like Drampa Garb. The Garb is attached to the Drampa. No one really gonna run a quad Garbodor and call it a day.
True.
Yeah.
Alright, so since last time we had an episode, there have been, a period of absence from us, which pretty much just means that there have been results coming in. So one of the decks that have been featuring Zoroark-GX and has found at least success at League Cup level is Ninetales Zoroark. So Ninetales Zoroark, the old Ninetales pretty much had Octillery and it regained new life from adding Zoroark into it. How do you guys feel about the deck right now?
Alright, so even before Zoroark, I really wanted to make Ninetales work. But when you look, you never sit down and like look at your opponent's deck and say, I'm gonna win. You always think, oh, I have a chance, or oh, this is auto loss. And with Zoroark, it doesn't really change that. You don't really have any auto wins, and that's just a no-no.
What about
I don't
Volcania?
like the deck at all. I don't think it hits good numbers. You're really dependent on Kukui all the time.
Yeah, for reference, one of the lists that have been finding success was running upwards of 3 Kukui, with most other decks running at least a minimum of 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's one of the draws of the deck is that people say, oh, I can afford to run Kukui because I have this extra draw engine, but the other side of that is you have to run Kukui because otherwise you're hitting 190, which is not that great of a number.
I mean, I wouldn't have the balls to take that to a League Cup. I think I would just stick to Bulu and I just can't think of too many matchups that this deck does better than Bulu, except maybe drop up, but only by a slight margin, since you're a Po Town.
For those wondering, even Volcanion is not an auto win. Volcanion's speed sometimes just runs through Ninetales.
Oh,
You
definitely.
you even have trouble hiding behind the baby Ninetales, so it's not a pretty sight. That said, as we have seen, it has found some success. It does fix some of the old problems that Ninetales did had. It does fill that gap of around 120 to 150 damage, and it that which does fix some numbers, but it's still not a pretty sight.
I think League Cups tend to have hype. Like every, I don't know, half quarter, a new deck gets hyped, and people just start playing a lot of it. Half quarter, it's like Zoroark Ninetales. I don't think it's inherently a good card. I think it's just very hyped right now. Good deck, I mean.
Yeah, that's quite possible. There's also the possibility that a player who's good thinks that the Ninetales deck that he likes just got a lot better and will play it, and he might just be outplaying a lot of people with a deck that's decent instead of just winning because the deck is great.
Exactly.
Yeah, as an example, I was actually present. I don't know if you guys saw the results. There was one Crabominable deck that did top a League Cup. I was actually present at the League Cup. Granted, I didn't lose to him, so you can't blame me for his success. So, I don't think any of us would have, even bigger balls to bring that to any big events. But, you can win. You can do well at a League Cup with a suboptimal deck.
If Crabominal can one shot like Trashalanche,
It one shot
it would be like legit
Grandpa,
crazy.
Trashalanche. I believe it one shots a Guardy after Po Town and I believe 2 Cocoa Spreads, so it's not even that good.
That's only 2 Cocoa Spreads.
Only 2.
Only 2.
And a Po Town.
Sounds
Just
easy.
like that, it smashes like Grandpa and Zoroark. I think that's the selling point.
Yeah, that was the selling point. There was a lot of Drampa that day. I wasn't one of them, so you can't blame me once again. I want to make sure that's clear. Alright, so next, the other deck that has featured Zoroark, but that has slowly been walking away from Zoroark is Gardevoir. So the top deck of the meta, the one that everybody really either loves or hates. So Zoroark similarly run Octillery, and for for some sort of testing, people have taken out the Octillery line to add the Zoroark line. Unlike Ninetales, I don't really think Zoroark benefits Gardevoir much. What do you guys think?
I think
This deck
people just
a lot.
want... Oh, sorry, you go.
Alright, great. So I actually play tested this deck a lot. First of all, it has like serious consistency issues because it's a stage 1 and a stage 2 line. 3-3 Zoroark and then like a trimmed down Gardevoir line. And overall, it was good. Like you could beat Grandpa, you could beat Galissapod, you could beat Metagross, all of that. You just struggle against Gardevoir because Zoroark is your early attacker, and you set it into like Gardevoir eventually. works until they get a Gallade, and then you just fall behind so quickly. Because the only way you can KO the Gallade is you put 3 energies on a Gardevoir. You put 3 energies on a Gardevoir, that Gardevoir is dead the next turn. You need to go exactly like Zoroark early, that gets Galladed. You kill the Gallade with a Gardevoir, that Gardevoir gets KO'd, and then you have to return with like a Clefairy, KO that Gardevoir, that Clefairy gets knocked out. You have 1 prize left, and you need to like come back with your opponent having 1 prize left. And that's like how all the Gardevoir matches go.
Yeah, that is a good point. Most of the time when we talk about decks and their matchups, we rarely actually talk about their mirror match. Uh, if you're actually playing Gardevoir right now at a big event, people estimate you might play up to 3 mirror matches. So losing the mirror match is a big deal, especially playing the BDIF.
Yeah, actually, I think Zoroark is good in Gardevoir. I really like the list of my partner I've been testing. We have a 2-2 Sylveon line and a 2-2 Zoroark that we managed to fit in. And I think it helps it a lot with turns where you can't draw your hand down below 5, with turns where you want something to attack but don't want to put your Guardian harm's way. But I see the point about the Gallade being a problem. I think you have potential to play around the Gallade if you know it's coming, because when you see another Gardevoir, you know they're going to be running one Gallade.
Yeah. So I think
Sorry, you go. I'm sorry.
I think you have more ways to play around it because you have an alternate pressure. But since I was running like straight Zoroark plus Gardevoir, I don't want to put my Gardevoir up early, right? And I don't want to put too much energy to take KOs. So I kind of have to play into the Gallade.
Well, you do also have the Plea parallel play with Sylveon. And you can use Sylveon as your early attacker if you don't want to put Zoroark up for Gallade to kill.
Yeah, no, I definitely like your list better than what I ran. That sounds like Sylveon would just go a long way to fixing the Gardevoir mirror.
Honestly, Sylveon goes a long way to fixing the Gardevoir deck in general. You also get access to Mallow with Zoroark, which you can't really run with Octillery just because it's not consistent.
To me, I think Gardevoir is one of those decks where people just like Zoroark so much that they just want to throw Zoroark in every single deck that they possibly can. And
I don't think they're wrong.
I mean, I don't think they are either, but I think that's just how I see Zoroark and Gardevoir lists.
I like it because the deck was already running 2 Stage 1 lines along with the Gardevoirs, but both the Stage 1 lines help consistency, because the Sylveon helps you set up, and then the Octillery helps you draw. But the Zoroark is just a little more versatile Octillery. So it's just kind of a straight upgrade from the old list in my eyes.
I agree. I just think, like I said, it's a vulnerability to Gallade. You just don't want to do that.
Yeah, practice the mirror match and hope they don't run the Octillery variant so you can snipe them back.
All right, so that's a pretty that was a pretty important discussion. So other decks that have tried to probably add a Zoroark in might include something like Decidueye. So Decidueye primarily is the old partner was primarily Ninetales. So for example, I believe I forget his first name, but something Mahone played.
Andrew Mahone.
Yeah, man, I don't know why I would forget something like that. Anyway, Andrew Mahone did take the Decidueye Ninetales to, I believe, decent finish in a large regionals. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, he got top 32.
Yeah, would he move? Do you think adding Zoroark might fix some of the problems, or is the Decidueye Ninetales is Ninetales the main partner and will remain the main partner?
Well, I saw Mahone on his channel was trying out Zoroark Ninetales, and I think his first impression was that he still liked the Ninetales variant a little more. I built both and tested both personally. I liked the Ninetales, but I think the Zoroark's a little bit stronger. I think the only thing you really lose is that you lose harder to Volcanion with Zoroark than you did with the Ninetales variant, but you don't have a particularly good Volcanion matchup anyway, so if you say, screw it, I'm losing to Volcanion, then I think it's better off switching to Zoroark.
My concern with Zoroark is I think it's less consistent, because with the Alolan Ninetales, you can just put an energy, put it in the active, and it does its thing on the first turn. Whereas with Zoroark, you need to dig out the evolution. You usually need to dig out a Floatstone or something.
So one other strength of, quote unquote strength of Alolan Ninetales is not really the Ninetales itself, is the Vulpix. So it's actually one of the best starting Pokemon you can actually do because it has the free beacon attack, which lets you surge. With Zoroark, I don't think Zorua, I believe that's what it's called, Zoroark gives the same value as a Vulpix.
No, the Zoroark you're pretty much never going to attack with any of them because all the standard ones have crap attacks. But I think you're okay losing out on the Vulpix because most of the games where I've used it, I just got in out of Vulpix anyway. But with Zoroark, you get access to Mallow. So with Mallow, you just put a Decidueye candy on top and then get it immediately instead of playing a Decidueye and a Dartrix and having the opponent play in and you're back to square one.
My issue is you need to dig out the Zoroark-GX.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's the core issue. And then not only that, but for it to do something more than just draw you 2 cards, you also need to dig out often a Floatstone and a DCE.
You see, I really like Decidueye Zoroark. In fact, like I want people to play it more because I really like how it plays, and I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of them top 32'd at London.
Yeah, it's the strongest Zoroark variant in that sense. Yeah,
it does have a pretty decent Gardevoir matchup simply because your what's it called?
Decidueye.
Well, with us beyond EX, if they don't run Mime, it's an auto win.
Yeah, that is. I don't know about auto win because I've said
Mime affects Zoroark, Decidueye.
But yeah.
Near auto win. It affects the Coco and the Latios that you're probably running, but with Zoroark, you can focus on that a little more and just kind of ignore the Coco. So.
All right, one of the bigger decks that will be running Zoroark is probably Golisopod. So Golisopod, we have seen straight Golisopod before Zoroark-GX came out, but with Zoroark-GX, people have more incentive to play something without Garbodor. What do you guys feel about that deck?
I'll go. Yeah, I think it's a terrible idea. I think you have 2 stage 1 lines that do the exact same thing. So why? For card draw, but I can just run Oranguru or Octillery if I want to do that. I'm just leaving a big mark on my face that says, "Please hit me with Gallade."
Similarly, well, another thing to know is that much like how Alolan Ninetales has a baby one, Zoroark also has a baby, which is the one from Breakpoint, which gives you that Keldeo effect, which brings you up and down, up and down.
The baby Zoroark, not the Zoroark-GX?
Yeah, so you can run both side by side, since you're using the same basic Pokemon to evolve from.
And it's amazing. Like, the baby Zoroark being able to hit for, like, I think it's like 190 with choice, right? If they have a full bench. I mean, that's insane. So.
Honestly, I think it gets to the point, like Grimy said, whenever you have these 2 attackers that both hit 120, but then you add in the stand-in Mindjack Zoroark that hits 190, to me it kind of seems like I'm getting more and more towards I just want to attack with Zoroark, and Golisopod's just kind of there in the deck. Because I think without Trash Avalanche, Golisopod really loses the ending power, which it didn't have that much of to begin with. So without something really strong towards the end, you're just hitting 120 every turn of the game and not really one-shotting anything important for the most part.
Even the baby Zoroark, I think it's a good card. I don't think it's a bad inclusion. I just think it takes a little too much deck space for something like
I don't think it's a selling point for the deck.
What matchups does it fix? It kind of helps against Volk, but it's not gonna like win you Volk. It helps against Rapagarb, which okay. I don't think it helps that much against Gardevoir.
So no, not really.
You're committing like 5 to 6 cards, and sure, it helps Rapagarb, which is a big plus, but for 6 cards, I don't think it's necessarily the greatest value. It's not necessarily the worst. It's just a little subpar, in my opinion.
I also think that this variant is strictly worse against Gardevoir because you're adding in this 2-prizer who is easier for Gardevoir to knock out, gets one-shot by Glade, and doesn't contribute as much as the Garbline because it doesn't shut off abilities and doesn't have Trash Avalanche to make a big hit or make them waste a turn to Twilight.
I'm actually thinking of trying a Golisopod deck. No Garbodor, Pheromosa, and a bunch of consistency cards. The reasoning is like the Drampa matchup is you need to knock out the first Drampa. So if they start Drampa and you Pheromosa fast raid them, that sets you up for a KO the next turn. That's such a good deal for you.
And that's about the only good use of fast raid I've heard so far. So.
But then when the fast rate is done, if you float stone it, you just attach 1 more grass energy and it's threatening like 200 damage in the late game.
So just to clarify, Pheromosa has Latios' attack, correct?
Yeah, but for 30.
Okay.
All right, so we've touched upon the main decks that are obviously not obviously, but the most obvious partners with Zoroark. So I'm just gonna go ahead and add a few. The main one I wanted to talk about was Xerneas Break. How do you feel about Xerneas Break adding a Zoroark?
Mm.
Well, helps. You're not a deck that wants to discard your energies, and your deck is mostly energies.
You don't really need to draw that much. As long as if you get your Bridget and you get one energy, you can start your deck's engine. That's the thing about Xerneas Break is it's a bonehead simple deck that runs itself basically. You just geomancy until you can kill something.
Need anything else? Like at most, Orankuru. That's enough. Like you don't need that much.
Or like the Garbotoxin maybe just as an anti-meta pick.
All right, so the last deck that has seen some success with Zoroark prior to GX being shown is actually Caesar Zoroark, which was strictly used as a Gardevoir counter. Will you guys ever consider playing that deck?
I think I would, only if you're playing like a 3-2-2 split with the baby and just the one GX just as like extra consistency, but that's the only reason why I would include the GX.
Well, my local meta is actually really Guardy heavy, so it wouldn't be that bad of a pick because basically no one around here plays anything else. There's like one of every other deck and 6 Guardies. But at the same time, I'd rather just run a deck that beats Guardy and beats a lot of other things too.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of decks can just beat Guardy, like Decidueye and Bulu, right? So I don't see the point of committing, like, you're taking a Zoroark deck, and then you're adding this metal line on top of it. I don't think it's worthwhile. Like, there's better ways. You can have a stronger deck that still beats Gardevoir.
If I'm running Scizor, I'd rather put it as a tech in like a Sil Valley metal deck if I were to run that, but I don't know if the Sil Valley deck is any good.
Alright, so I think we touched
I feel like the same way about Silvally. There's just too many ways that you can already counter Gardevoir and it's just not. There's no point in committing all these like memories into an otherwise like level deck just to fix one matchup.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. So we've talked about pretty much all the major changes Zoroark will bring in Standard, and luckily with London coming up, most of these questions and concerns will be answered. So let's move into something a little more ambiguous, which is Expanded. So Expanded got a lot of hype for Zoroark, mainly because you get access to more of the cards, similar to how Japan's Zoroark Lycanroc deck. Uh, the Japan Zoroark deck had a lot of cards that weren't available in Standard, which are available in Expanded, which gave the deck a lot of hype. So let's start with that. As a reference point, I will be adding that list down in the description below. You guys can look at that. So pretty much Zoroark Lycanroc is as it sounds. You have Zoroark and the Lycanroc as partners in crime. How do you guys feel about the deck, and why should we never call it emo furries?
Nah, it's the Fox and the Hound, bro.
I think if you're going to play Zoroark and Expanded, I think there are just a couple other options that I would choose before that.
All right.
It's hard to pin down a Zoroark variant because it's so wide open. There's a million partners for it. I don't really know which one's the best. I know which ones I like. I don't know which one's the best.
But G-Man, what other decks would you consider over Zoroark Lycanroc?
I quad Zoroark, and then you can play with Skyfield and Execute, so you just have this like amazing draw engine, and you're just hitting crazy numbers.
So you just cut out the Lycanrocs completely. Go for max consistency and all that.
Yeah.
So a question for that one specifically, would that look similar to like a Mega Ray deck, except instead of a Mega Ray, you just have Lycanroc, not Lycanroc, Zoroark?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, you probably need more basic Pokemon because you're losing the three Rock Rusts. What are you putting in Marshadows? Maybe, I don't know.
That I'm not exactly sure. That's just like one thought that comes to mind that I would do. But then the other is Night March. I wanna make Zoroark and Night March work.
So, for example,
Very bad at Night March, but I like how it fixes the Gardevoir matchup for you.
Well, the thing I like about Zoroark in either Night March or Vespiquen, because I'm testing with Vespiquen right now, is it kind of solves the Karen problem. Because after a Karen, if you can get a Skyfield out, then they just put all these basics back in your deck, and if you Sycamore, you'll draw like 5 of them. So you just fill up your Skyfield and hit for 210 with a Choice Band.
So what I don't like about the Vespiquen variant isn't like Karen. The issue is Oricorio, because you need a lot of Pokemon in this card to hit numbers.
True.
And Vespiquen variants online, and by the time that they get to that numbers, you just Oricorio, and then you take 3 prizes because you have enough to knock out like one of their basic Pokemon and a Shaman. You Oricorio again, like you could have just not done anything for the first 3 turns, and you just win off of 2 Oricorios in the late game.
True, but you also have the option to just not dump a lot of stuff. If you want to go aggro Zoroark at the beginning of the game, then you start hitting 180s or 210s, and if they're sitting waiting to Oricorio, then they're not accomplishing very much. Of course, Oricorio is still bad for you, but I think you have the option to not feed it as much if you see it or if you think it's coming. Of course, that also comes up the issue of why are you running Vespiquen, but, you know.
I don't think it's strong enough. I don't think it's worth the risk.
Okay, well, first, obviously, Vespiquen and Night March are decks that run similarly, but are in most cases different. So, for example, it covers different matchups. If you do run the Vespiquen, you probably do have a better matchup against Zoroark Lycanroc due to grass weakness. So, specifically, I want to ask, does it improve your matchups good enough to warrant actually adding it though? Because adding it over, like, let's say, for example, Michael Pramwatt's deck that won Fort Wayne, he had a one Oranguru. So would you be willing to take out the one Oranguru for a minimum of 1/1 line of not like a rock Zoroark, or would it not be worth enough?
I think the main thing Zoroark adds is the ability to save battle compressors.
Yeah. Have you guys seen the Vespiquen Flareon list that had Salazzle-GX in it?
Yeah.
Andrew, the other Andrew, God, Wambolt? Was that his name?
Maybe.
The one from the Charizard Lounge?
Yeah, that's Wambolt.
Yeah, I believe that's the one he ran. I tried that one online also, and it fell to the same problems I had with Vespiquen before. It was really hard to. Your problem wasn't really the early game, and even if it was the early game, your early game actually got worse because there are more fat Pokemon in expanded with the introduction of the new GXs, and pretty much before, let's say Salazzle was released earlier on, you could have gotten Salazzle hitting higher numbers by turn 4 or 5. Now you have to wait a little more, like 6 or 7.
Yeah. I do like the property of Salazzle that it just runs off of basic energy, because that's a really big point with like their win condition against Zoroark is they Garbotoxin up, and then they end you to a small card count, and then you can't do anything for a few turns, and you just get Black Raid and then swept. Salazzle in that regard, it can't do that play against you if you set up Salazzle and you take your early prizes against Garbodor, which you will because they're really slow.
Yeah, my only thing is that Salazzle's just so dead in the early game. You're hitting 110 off a 2-prizer, whereas Zoroark has a damage cap of 210 in the early and late game. So it kind of fulfills Salazzle's role of hitting late game, it just has the early game presence as well.
Alright, so going back to that, the original idea of, let's say, to play it like a Mega Ray, is it actually worth playing it over a Mega Ray, though?
Oh, hell yes.
Yeah.
It's not a Mega. No Spirit Link required.
No Spirit Link and no loss to Night March. And
no loss to Sudowoodo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because you can afford to run a Lowland Muck in Zoroark if you want to beat Sudowoodo. Mega Ray can't do that because everything it sets up with and relies on is basic.
Yep.
Wasn't there like that deck that won like some Japan regionals that was like using Zoroark and Dimension Valley and like things like a Lowland Muck and the Tapu Lele promo and stuff like that?
Yeah, but even if that was existing, I don't think we'll see Tapu Lele promo for at least a little bit.
Yeah. I think that's a good deck. I just have no idea how to pilot it, and I have no interest in learning right now. So there's only like a few weeks until the actual regionals.
I think that deck plays a little like that Meowstic deck that did decently well at the Brazil regionals. You just move damage counters around. Anyway, it's not really relevant to the conversation because Tapu Lele promo may never see the light of day over here in the US.
I have Spirit Tomb and Counter Energy, so I don't think it's inconceivable that someone plays something like that. But like, even if Lele promo exists, how do you beat Zoroark, Lycanroc? Right? But you need to play a Dimension Valley of Black Ray. So if they have a Skyfield up, you play Dimension Valley, they discard all their GXs.
All right,
you do.
We mentioned about Zoroark, Lycanroc a few times, but for some people, maybe they haven't seen the deck yet. So how about we go ahead and how about one of us just go ahead and describe what's the main goal you want to do with the deck? What's your win conditions?
So I think Zoroark Lycanroc is just about efficiency, picking your attacks where they go.
I would argue that in some matchups, namely Night March and Darkrai, you actually play the control aspect, right? You're all about getting that Alolan Muck up, and then stopping your opponent from taking big one-shots. Like also, it also helps against like Turbo Turtles. You're playing control. You're all about denying them the one-shots, and then you swing back after you lose a few prizes.
Another thing I really like in Zoroark decks that could go into really any of them is Seismitoad. Because Seismitoad plus Karen is basically a death sentence against a lot of Night March decks. So if you put that up, then a lot of decks can't answer it. Even against Turtles, you deny their Seeker for Blacksmith, and you do 120 with Choice Band while item locking.
I already think Zoroark Lycanroc has like an 80 to 90% win rate against Turbo Turtles and Night March just off the basis of Alolan Muck alone. What other matchups would you say Seismitoad helps with? Because I feel like I would need that extra value to justify it in the deck.
That's fair. I think it's mainly those two. I've mainly been running Zoroark without Lycanroc, and Toad helps with those, but yeah, with Lycanroc you probably just snipe whatever you need to, and then Dangerous Rogue whenever you want to take a one-shot and you don't have a bench.
My Rockruffs against Turbo Turtles or Night March. I think it's completely unnecessary. Skyfield, then I'll bench some Rockruffs, but otherwise, I'm not going to pull it with my Bridget.
Yeah.
So regarding Alolan Muck, how necessary do you think the cards are? And if they are necessary, is it a 2-2 line or is it more like a 1-1 line? I've been testing 1-1, it's been doing alright. Is it worth pushing it up to 2-2?
One line? The logic being that if one of them gets knocked out and I have the second Grimer on the bench, I can puzzle the Alolan Muck back on and put it back down.
Yeah, plus you just want to fill up your bench anyway, so you might as well run 2 basics.
2, you can use the Alolan Grimer's Division attack if it gets stuck in the active, so that's also nice.
Yeah.
So if we don't look at Zoroark specifically as a sort of engine in Expanded, most of us will probably see it as Zoroark Lycanroc. So what do you think are the bad matchups for Zoroark Lycanroc?
How does it do against Golisopod Garb?
Like 50-50. Their armor press is a big problem. It really hurts you if you bench Lycanroc at any point because they one-shot it. Seismitoad, if they Seismitoad and put a Fury Belt on it, you just can't one-shot that either. And then they just Acerola, 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 and then you lose.
Mm-hmm.
You do have Dangerous Rogue to take out one thing. So if you're in a bind on the armor press or Toad, then you can just one-shot that.
That's kind of hard because you need 2 manual attachments to pull that off, and they probably have like enhanced hammers.
Yeah, probably.
How does
the matchup?
How does it do against some like a Gardevoir GX in Expanded?
Their teammates, they rare candy, Gallade, knock you out, and then you take out the Gallade, and then they Versus Seeker, teammates, rare candy, rescue Stretcher, Gallade, knock you out again, and then you lose. Mates,
I think you need a game plan or some kind of tech for Gardevoir, but I don't know if you can just try to outspeed and just smack Gardevoir before they can really get anything set up or what, but you need some kind of game plan for that matchup, otherwise it's just bad.
Lucky and like top deck fighting energy in your opening hand, so you can actually take out 2 Pokemon without just losing a Zoroark to a Gallade right away.
So, unlike most other decks in the expanded formats, I think Zoroark-Lycanroc is probably the only one that doesn't need a direct answer to Night March or, Vespiquen. But if you do, would you use the Karen or would you use Oricorio?
I'd say Karen Toad.
I think Oricorio hands down. It's such a strong win condition.
You see, I like Oricorio, but I also like Karen's. Like, if you have room, both, but I think I would honestly choose Karen before I put in Oricorio if I had one slot.
I like Karen because it also helps your deck engine, since you're trying to fill up your bench for big numbers, so it recycles all your basics and puts them all back.
Process. I think Karen's completely dead in any other matchup that isn't Night March, and I think Oricorio solves the Night March matchup like good enough. It's like 80 to 90%. You don't need anything better than that, and then it's like marginally useful against Garbodor.
I guess I don't see it doing all that much against Garb, but I guess
if you damage, like you can deliberately avoid taking prizes because you don't want to get end. So you can do like 150 and then bench Oricorio later, and then just threaten like counters to win the game at the end. Like I said, Garbodor's win condition is they lock you out of energies. Well, if you have an Oricorio on the bench to close out the game, it's really important.
Yeah, but it's so squishy and it won't do that much damage unless they just have a loaded discard pile, basically all their Pokemon in. It'll maybe take one prize against the Trubbish, but I don't know. I guess I just don't see it taking that many prizes against Garb and being that much of a threat.
Has a hard time pressuring you in return. So even if it's just in the act of like poking for 60 each turn for 0 energy, that's really good because then you can start energizing your bench, and then you can have a stockpile of energized Pokemon, and that's also a win condition for Zoroark, Lycanroc, and the Garbodor matchup.
So
yeah, but Tool Drop's only for 1 energy.
But you don't really care about them tool dropping you because, like I said, their win condition is Garbatoxin. So if they take out your Oricorio for a tool drop, you get to take out a Trubbish. And that's what you're trying to do the entire game. You're just trying to deny that Garbatoxin all game.
how do you feel is the deck's matchup against something like Trevenant, which originally we thought would be one of the best decks in the format, which we haven't quite seen that sort of level, but it is a relatively played deck.
5% in Zoroark's favor?
Has a really good matchup against Trevenant.
Because it hits for weakness, right?
Yeah, you need like 3 things on the bench to one-shot Trevenant, and then you just draw anyway through the item lock with trade, so you just don't really care that much about what they're trying to do to you.
And since you need so little Pokemon, you can easily stagger your benching, so the Silent Fear is just ineffective.
And you can try to play around Necrozma by just not using Shamans as much, because if they Black Ray your Zoroarks, they need like 4 Silent Fears to knock them out.
So I was thinking Espeon EX would be a great tech in Trevenant against it, because then you only need 2 Silent Fears or 1 Black Ray, and then you could potentially wipe the board, and you have to force them to not bench as many Zoroarks, right? Because you need to force them to have to hold a Zoro in hand after the first Silent Fear, put it back down, and then go from there, and then they have to like win the game off of 1 Zoroark-GX or something like that.
I can see that. Honestly, Espeon EX might be good in Trevenant in general, just because it helps with matchups like Guardy, but it's a lot more expanded matchups. There's a lot more big basic decks.
Trevenant is a harder matchup for Zoroark than Darkrai, Turbo Turtles, or Night March, just because they get their cheesy starts every now and then. Whereas even if they get a cheesy start, you still win.
All right, so we've pretty much touched upon most of the big decks that people will be expecting at, let's say, for example, San Jose, which is the first big expanding event. So I'm just going to go ahead and just list a few. I want to get you guys' opinion on those matchups. So the first one is Sableye Garbodor.
Deck to pilot.
Yeah, it is a very difficult deck. It's also a very time-consuming deck. So if you want to watch for time, that's one deck that you might not want to consider.
Yeah, if you want to be that one guy who plays nothing but Sableye Garb and master it completely, then you can do well with it. Otherwise, I don't think it's a deck you can just pick up and expect to do well with, even if it has good matchups, quote unquote. There's still things that can beat you, and there's still ways people can play around it.
So just out of curiosity, I haven't played Sableye Garb since Trash Launch came out, and so like, is it that much harder to pilot now?
It's actually a little bit easier because you have a secondary win condition with the Trash Lunch garb, but it still has the same difficulty curve that it always had.
Yeah, that's true. That Trash Launch is a huge buff for the deck, but really the biggest problem it runs into is item lock. It doesn't really have a good way to deal with item lock at all.
One of those things, like Toad. Toad fixes your Sableye matchup if you're playing Zoroark.
That's true.
Actually, I think Zoroark, Lycanroc, bad Sableye players, you'll 100% win against them. But if you're playing against a good Sableye player, it's going to be a rough matchup, unless you play that Seismitoad.
Alright, so how about Seismitoad variant itself? You know, you have Seismitoad lasers, Seismitoad bats, Seismitoad garb even. And you know, for those who are really hipster, they could even try a Seismitoad Giratina.
Yeah.
Matchup against Garbodor.
Yeah, you can't really run hammers anymore with Garb running around.
You know, Garb's just going to righteous edge you over and over.
That too. Drampa exists. Drampa is awful for Toad.
Alright, so how about
Night March runs Tauros now and then.
Yeah, it does. And with Marshadow, you can even copy the Tauros' attack.
Yeah.
True.
So,
I mean, I like the card. I just think it has a few issues.
right.
Yeah, I don't think Toad can really be the center of a deck anymore. I think it's more of a tech and stuff like Potters or Zoroark decks.
And Gardevoir, right? Because then it fixes your Night March matchup, potentially.
I mean, you could. Toad plus Karen is great.
So one deck I think Zoroark Lycanroc might actually struggle with is Mega Ray. How do you guys feel about that matchup?
I think you should run Sudowoodo in it for the mirror match, so if you run Sudowoodo, that fixes the matchup anyway.
But
I think it's that bad because you can just Lycanroc up their Shamans all day long.
It's also true.
But, and then
with Strong Energy, Lycanroc would one-shot him if you run Strong Energy.
The only thing...
So, I have played the matchup once, and the only time I lost, basically, I went second, and he sets up like a 5 Pokemon board, so he doesn't play into stand-in Zoroark, and turn 2 it's just like Hex, turn 3 Hex, turn 4 Hex, and I just never set up.
So you're saying it's pretty much dependent on how well set up he could get on his first turn?
Kind of like the Gardevoir matchup, like Mega Gardevoir, I mean. They get 90% of their value from spamming their instantly, and if you just don't set up early enough, they can lock you out of your setup and then just win off the back of that.
Alright, so running down the list, the next one is Archie's Blastoise. This one is a little bit interesting, mainly because there's a few diehard Archie's Blastoise players down here in California. What do you guys feel about that matchup?
Well, the Toad tech would go a long way against it, because if you can knock out Blastoise and also get Toad, or if you just Toad before they get Blastoise out, then they can't do anything.
Archie's Blastoise is good matchup supposed to be.
And running down the list, probably the last important one we had to talk about is something like Darkrai, which, in my opinion, is pretty much almost as close as an auto win you could find in expanded format.
Yeah. One honorable mention I just have to throw out just because it's a personal favorite. Eels. Anything with eels? Do you think that'll be an expanded? And that's a good matchup, right?
It's a good matchup mainly because of weakness, and even then, even if it wasn't, you need quite a lot of lightning energies to simply knock out something with 210 HP.
Ability dependent though. So like I ran into an Eels Rayquaza deck, and I would have lost the prize race because it can one-shot like Zoroark-GX. But since at the time I was running Hex, I was just able to stall him out and win that way. But if I weren't running Hex, and I'm currently not running Hex in my Zoroark-Lycanroc deck, I would have lost that matchup.
There is also, if you play Sudowoodo down early, then they can't really do anything because they need to set up all their eels, and if they need a bench of Shaman or a Lily, then they're just kind of screwed. They also can't run. They can't have 3 eels, a Keldeo, and a backup attacker at the same time if they have a Sudowoodo down.
Okay.
Sudowoodo for my Zoroark-Lycanroc deck, because I feel like the deck's biggest issue is its own consistency. And I feel like Sudowoodo doesn't help enough matchups besides the mirror slot necessarily. I guess that boils down to whether I think a lot of people are going to be playing Zoroark-Lycanroc at San Jose, and honestly, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a question. And additionally, if Zoroark-Lycanroc does see some level of success at London, for example, in its standard, that might also influence people to try it on expanded.
The standard, though, no way. It's not strong enough.
We've seen worse things top 32. All right, so speaking of London and San Jose, what do you guys feel will be the immediate impact of Zoroark? And as a two-parter, what do you guys recommend somebody who would be going to London to actually pick up and play? So let's just start, back alphabetically. What do you feel, Blaguard?
Well, for just someone picking up and playing Zoroark, picking up and playing a deck for expanded or for standard?
So London is the first big standard.
Yeah, London standard.
So it's
I'm confusing myself.
So the first question would be, what do you think is the immediate impact of Zoroark? And then the second question is, let's say you were going to London, what would you pick up and play?
In standard, I don't think Zoroark's gonna. It's hard to say. It won't change very much. It'll be a constant presence in a lot of decks, but I don't see it really destroying any particular deck or really becoming its own deck that skyrockets to the top based only on Zoroark. I think it'll be a new thing that you have to be aware of and you have to prepare for it, but I don't think it's gonna just completely destroy anything. So if I was going to London, I would expect to see a lot of Zoroark. I would probably play Zoroark Decidueye. If not, I would play just Hybrid Garb with Espeon and Drampa.
Alright, so you're just going safe with that Espeon Drampa. Alright, so G-Man, what do you feel?
Okay, so I don't think Zoroark's gonna be. I think a lot of people are gonna play it, but I don't know, like, how well it'll do. But I think you should have an answer to Zoroark in some way or form. I don't think you really want too much of a bad matchup against it, just because I think there'll just be a lot of people playing it. And for a deck that, if I were going, I would play Drampa Garb 100% with thick Espeon lines.
All right, finally, Grimy. What do you feel will be the first impact of Zoroark, and what deck would you play?
I don't think it's going to have a lot of impact because I think a lot of the existing decks have answers to it already. So Drampa has Potown, Gardevoir has Gallade. A lot of decks can just one-shot it. It's going to have an impact in that sense. If I had to pick, I'm going to take Bulu just because I think I'm still going to smash Gardevoir players. A way to not lose horribly to Drampa, and I think that's good. But for anyone else, I would definitely just recommend Gardevoir or Drampa Garb. Although I probably wouldn't copy Tord's list. I'd try some new cards. Like even Tord himself said that he probably won't run the exact same list that's been popular lately.
All right, so I guess I might as well give my input. So I think the immediate impact of Zoroark would be that there will be a raise in the number of Ninetales players. So this, I believe, London will probably be the biggest event, the event with the largest share, the metagame share that Ninetales will ever have. I think it'll probably go down after people realize it ain't as good as expected. Not to say that it isn't good. Specifically, if I were to go to London, the deck I play is actually Greninja. This is actually a two-parter reason. The first reason is that if I do badly, I could always just blame it on Greninja hands, right?
You're not
I
wrong.
can't argue with that.
The one thing I noticed is that no matter how bad you play, when you walk up to your buddy, he looks at you and asks you why, you just say Greninja, and he's like, "Oh, I understand." And then the second reason is that Greninja is one of the few decks that actually have Slightly favored. It was a little more flavored against Gardevoir prior to Sylveon, but it is still a minorly favored matchup. It does well against Volcanion, and it has a winning matchup against Ninetales too. I believe Galicipa will be at its lowest point, which will let you save a few L's. So moving into San Jose, which will be the first big expanding event, what do you guys think is the immediate impact of Zoroark? And similarly, what would you play if you were actually going to go? Not to say that you might not go.
I think Zoroark Lycanroc is going to have the same position that Zoroark Ninetales has in Standard, that it's a big hype deck that probably won't live up to the make first place, is what I think. I think it's a tier 1.5 deck. I don't think it's a tier 1 deck.
Yeah, if I was going, I'd probably play Zoroark with Night March or Bees, or I would just play like Zoroark Toolbox with Seismitoad and whatever text I felt like splashing in for every different matchup.
I like the matchups that the Night March version has over the Lycanroc version.
If I were going, I would just, like, as much as I like Zoroark, I would just put it to the side and play Garbodor, Necrozma, that sort of spread thing.
Still a good
It's
deck.
harder to learn, though.
Yeah.
I don't think it's something I would recommend to a new player, but definitely it's a strong pick if you want to win.
No, I think it's a higher skill floor deck, but it's very strong if you can get it down.
Yep.
I think the main appeal of the Psyche Toolbox deck is simply the number of options you have. So, just a Mew does a bunch of stuff, Mimikyu does a bunch of stuff, Drampa does a bunch of stuff. Whether you or not you want to actually use Blaguard-GX is also an interesting call. It's a deck that has so many options, unlike most other decks that either have one or two strategy that they could go for.
I think Stardust Jirachi is going to start seeing play. I think it's really, really good in that deck.
Yeah, because Stardust is a colorless, isn't it? So Mew could do it for free.
I think the important point is that it protects itself. You only have 2 rescue stretchers. So if your matchup is about energy denial, it protects itself. You don't need to burn, like, they Guzma up, and then you still have the Stardust Jirachi.
Yeah, because you already had Drampa with Righteous Edge, and you could Righteous Edge for free, but Stardust is just Righteous Edge for 10 less damage, but also protects you.
Wait, how are you Righteous Edging for free?
Mew copies it.
Oh, Mimikyu, or Mew.
No, Mew.
You're right.
A baby Mew from Fates Collide copies it, and Dimension Valley affects Mew.
Right, that just shows how many options there are with the deck.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. You also can Berserk for a DC.
Yeah, that
one. Oh no, this is broken.
Kind of.
That said, if I were going to San Jose, I might actually look into Turbo Turtles. Simply, it's the most straightforward deck there is. Your strategy doesn't really change.
Is dead. I think Zoroark Lycanroc, I think it's going to be clarity, and it just steamrolls Turbo Turtles.
I think Turbo Turtles does better against it than Darkrai would. So if you're picking between those two for like the easy decks, I'd say Turtles over Darkrai.
I disagree on the basis that Darkrai can usually take their first prize before you set up Alolan Muck. Then they can dead end you, and then all they need is to left the Shaman on the board, and they can Guzma up the Shaman and take the last knockout that way.
True, whereas but you can also use Blacksmith to set up attackers a lot quicker in Turtles. So, like, the first turn, if you get Volcanions on the bench for Steam Up, and Turtonator and Blacksmith, you have potential to just one-shot something.
Never take a one-shot, and if you're always using Blacksmith to keep your Steam going, you can't Guzma and Blacksmith. So what Zoroark's just going to do is, they'll tank a hit, they'll put it on their bench or their Acerola, and they'll just keep going, and you'll just never take prizes. Whereas Darkrai continues to threaten taking prizes.
I suppose. I don't know, Darkrai just, for me, it needs more pieces to hit the one-shot than Turtles do.
A quick question.
I'm mostly focusing on the point that Zoroark can literally just control it completely. They can just completely lock Turtles out of taking any prizes at all. One prize, and then you can take a 5-prize loss. You still win anyways.
That's true, it's possible.
A quick thing I did want to add and ask is, do you think Buzzwole will see any play in expanded?
Mm, I don't think so.
Maybe if Force was still around, Plume Buzzwole might be a thing, but since that's not an option, I don't know.
I was actually thinking of a Plume Zoroark.
That would be great.
Zoroark? Oh wow.
Yeah, because I was like,
That'd be
how do I
so
beat
annoying to
Gardevoir?
play
And
against.
I was like, why don't I put a Vileplume in there?
I mean, the old Plume from last format didn't run any VS Seekers, so you got good practice for this format in standard.
Now, you see, if you want to beat Gardevoir, just run like 4 copies of Viper and Hypnotoxic Lasers.
Okay, so like, I was seriously considering Vileplume in Zoroark, but the core issue is, I think you lose the mirror to other Zoroark decks because they'll have Lycan Rocks and they'll have like just as much resources after the item lock. Right, so item lock actually is like hurting you as much as it's hurting your opponent. But since your opponent was the one that committed resources to the Vileplume, they win.
All right, so Grammy, you seem
If the
pretty
mirror wasn't, I would
confident.
definitely consider Vileplume like Zoroark.
Grammy, you seem pretty confident we'll be seeing some Zoroark Lycanroc at San Jose.
Oh yeah,
Using your infinite knowledge, what do you think will be the metagame share, roughly?
Gardevoir. So Gardevoir was like 5 of the top 32 last time, so maybe like 3 or 4 out of the top 32 maybe will be
So,
Zoroark Lycanroc. That's my guess.
all right. Similarly, what do you the other two feel?
Um, I don't know. I think it might do well.
That
It's
sounds
hard
about
to
right to
say.
me. I think Zoroark Lycanroc is hyped, which is why it's going to see play, but I don't know. I kind of just have the feeling that a better Zoroark variant is going to pop up at some point that'll take it over a little bit.
Obviously, when it pops up, we're all gonna pat ourselves on the head and say, "Ah, why didn't I think of that? It was so obvious."
Of course.
Testing Zoroark Bats. I think that's interesting. I think it fixes the Gardevoir matchup because then you can just start picking off Raltses without needing to attack into them.
Yeah, certainly better against Gardevoir.
But I think it's also terrible against the Zoroark Lycanroc mirror because then the bats don't really do anything.
Yeah, because Zoroark's numbers are so high, the bat's really only helping against Guardy.
Yeah, that's the core issue. Like, it helps against Night March, helps against Guardy, and then everything else, it just doesn't feel very useful.
Because the only other thing it would help is against Fury Belts, but like Field Blower and Zoroark both exist.
Well, like, the extra 20 damage could put, like, an Armor Press Golisopod in range, or, like, a Fury Belted Seismitoad, if you think Seismitoad Golisopod is going to be a thing.
Yeah.
All right. So similarly, regarding deck building though, so Zoroark Lycanroc, most of the cards are pretty self-explanatory. One thing I did want to explore is the energy count. What do you guys feel is the correct energy count? Because I've seen lists with strong energy, I've seen lists with rainbow energy, I've seen lists with basic energy. What do you guys feel is the correct call?
For the fighting energy. And mostly just because you can attach that fighting energy to any other Pokemon and just use it as to pay for like retreat cost or something like that. Plus, it doesn't get enhanced hammered.
So I think if we're talking about a Lycanroc Zoroark, I think you want to play 3 basic, 4 strong, 4 TCE. That's what I would do.
Yeah, that sounds good.
The Japanese list only ran 3 energies, 3 fighting energies, like 2 fighting and then 1 strong.
I think it's a matter of how heavily you're focusing on Lycanroc, because Lycanroc's numbers outside of the GX attack are really bad without strong energy. But I don't know if you want to just focus Zoroark and use Lycanroc mainly for the ability and then GX once per game.
That, and like, the strong energy, the only number it fixes is against Shaman, and I think Zoroark just one-shots Shaman easily enough that you don't need the strong energy for that.
It also helps you one-shot stuff like Garb and maybe Volcanion, but
That's
you just
true.
can use Zoroark.
But the problem is it's a special energy, so then you get Righteous Edged, and I'd rather not be Righteous Edged. I'd rather just not one-shot a Trashalanche.
So one thing I did, while I was tweaking around with my Zoroark Lycanroc deck, is that I noticed that one of the Zoruas in expanded that is legal to play with is actually the Ascension one. Ascension, for those who don't know, is when you do it, you pretty much evolve it as your attack. So I actually started playing around with rainbow energies, so that if my hand is actually that bad, I could actually just attach a rainbow to a Zorua and then just evolve into a Zoroark for next turn.
I don't like the 50 HP because lasers are a thing. Plus, I don't like it's a dark energy, right?
Yeah, it's one dark.
I'd rather run the paralysis version since it's a colorless and it has 60 HP.
By the colorless version, you mean
For one colorless energy, flip a coin if heads paralyze your opponent's Pokemon.
That sounds pretty good, actually. Just bubble.
yeah, it's pretty much bubble. Yeah, 10 minutes.
Also, there's a 70 HP Zorua from some set. I don't remember which one, but that might be the best option. Just a little extra HP.
I recall seeing one, but maybe if there is, I'd probably switch it for a 70 HP. Just dodging lasers is
Yeah.
like the problem is they put down once the Viper, they laser you, and then even if you get rid of their stadium, your Zorua still dies the next turn because of this Viper.
All right, so Zoroark is probably one of the more interesting cards to come out of recent set. Do you guys think? What do you? Let's say it doesn't quite find the success we're trying to get. We're trying to hope that it does give. What do you think you need to look for in the following sets that would push it to succeed?
The new Soul Galeo needs to push Gallade out of the format. I think that's all it needs. Happens. Zoroark runs rampant in the format.
I guess there's also the question of, does Zoroark beat Solgaleo with new Solgaleo?
I think it's faster. You know, you can Trickster GX to one-shot a Soul Galeo.
But then you would
But
have to
then
start
based
running
off the
Dark
back of its
Energy.
inherent speed and that GX attack.
Do you guys think the new unit energies that were just revealed would affect the meta positively for Zoroark?
Well, we don't have the dark one out yet, do we?
No.
Well, if it comes out, it's Dark Fighting Fairy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it would
That'd actually be
pretty much
perfect for
be
Zoroark
positive
Lycanroc.
for Zoroark
That,
Lycanroc.
and then you could, instead of running the rainbow. Wait, never mind. Forget what I was saying.
Like, once again, I don't want to run
Special energies.
special energies in Zoroark Lycanroc, so I wouldn't use unit energies anyways. And I just don't see what Dark Fairy pairings there are. Or Gardevoir and Expanded, that doesn't sound very good.
No. Because the main problem with it is it's special, so it doesn't interact with stuff like Secret Spring.
Yeah, that's a big problem. And then, like, you really want to run Wonder Energy in Expanded, because Wonder Energy is so good.
Yeah, it stops dead end, stops a lot of stuff. Stops Rider's Edge.
All right, perfect. So this episode has been quite fruitful. It's a really good episode if anybody is interested in Zoroark-GX and to sort of give them ideas of what exactly you could do with them in both standard and expanded. We touched upon it as a sort of engine. We talked about it as sort of partner, and we also talked about it as its own deck itself. So how about we just go ahead and do a sort of outro and ask everybody here to say their goodbyes and also to see. I want to ask you all what sort of concept or topic you really want to see talked about or discussed about. So so that we're not always doing it alphabetically, let's do it verse alphabetically. So what do you feel, Grammy?
I think if we were to do another topic, I'd really like to go over around Parallel Plea, because I think people are still underestimating Bulu against Gardevoir. And I think that has to do with the fact that a lot of Bulu players play around Parallel Plea, whereas you should be able to just tank a Parallel Plea and still win a Gardevoir matchup, because Bulu's just that favored in that matchup.
Alright, so you're pretty much interested to see how would you come back from Sylveon's GX attack Plea GX, which is pretty much exclusively used in Gardevoir right now.
Yep.
Perfect. Alright, G-Man?
I don't know. I think I would want to discuss the results of London. I'm really intrigued to what that'll bring and what that'll mean for the rest of the format for the next couple of standard regionals.
Alright, so that's one a simple but direct topic. And finally, Blaguard, our returning guest, who may, like always, return again.
Well, thanks for having me on again. It was a pleasure, and I think the big obvious deck we haven't talked about yet that's just so good in standard and also good in expanded is Gardevoir. There's a lot of I don't say there's a lot of ways to run it, but people have mostly settled on one way, and we sort of discussed the viability of Zoroark in it. But it's a really good deck overall. It might change in the future, but other than that, I think we just talk about what developments there are since it's been a while since we had a big event.
All right. So from what I'm seeing, the best sort of video we could probably do is actually just do a profile on Gardevoir with a large section dedicated to specifically Plea parallel. How does that sound to everybody?
That sounds great.
That
I'm
could
gonna
be
be
cool.
honest, Gardevoir is not Gardevoir. I'm just experienced with the Bulu versus Gardevoir end of things.
All right. So we get a Bulu expert to give us all the tips and tricks, so that obviously anybody who listens to this will do well with Bulu from here on out. All right, so I'd like to thank everybody here for actually spending, a good hour of their lives, probably wasted over here on the channel. Uh, like always, I'll go ahead and edit it, and it'll be out hopefully before London, not Monday, because that'd be too late. And I'm sure, like the rest of you, I'm excited to see the results of London and the repercussions they'll have on the metagame. All right, so that'll be everything for today. Thank you all for listening.